What is that story from your school? Story number 1. School trip to China. On the day of the return, a 16-year-old girl from my grade stole a pair of sunglasses from the airport and got caught by airport security. She stayed behind while everyone went home. Her parents had to fly to China from halfway across the world to bail her out. Made the news. Reply: what is it with people stealing glasses in China? Story number 2. Student, my freshman year of high school, had a mental breakdown. The health teacher failed him. Rumor was, he got beat at home for it, and so he took it out on the teacher. He started screaming in the middle of class. Teacher sent him to the hall, and when she opened the door to check on him, he had constructed a homemade blowtorch with hairspray and a lighter to try to catch her in fire. When she opened the door, all you see was flames. He was shortly expelled afterwards, and the teacher took a few months off of work. Don't know whatever happened to the kid. Reply 1. Wait, so did the teacher get burned or was she okay? That's so messed up. Reply 2. Luckily, she jumped back in time. If there was any damages, it was very minimal. Everyone had to hide in the classroom while she called for security, and eventually the police showed up. Story number 3. One of our custodians had sex with a teacher. His wife, who was also a custodian, kicked him out of the house. A month later, one of the coaches unexpectedly went into a locker room after hours and discovered he'd been living at the school undetected. He was fired. Reply: my elementary school had a less extreme version of this. I was too young to know what was going on, but one day my normally calm teacher kept bursting into tears throughout the day, and at the same time, our longtime custodian was suddenly replaced. Turns out, the teacher had been hooking up with the married custodian and he'd abruptly dumped her and left town. Story number 4. There was a kid who intentionally took a shit in the middle of the gym for $10, and for some reason, everyone called him Parmesan after that. Funnier thing is, this guy works for a sanitation company now. Story 5. 84 students were arrested or apprehended for meth in one day. A girl, their dealer, gave cops the information of all of her customers. She kept records and agreed to go to rehab instead of going to prison. Story 6. Morning news show crew had their camera accidentally go live and broadcast to the entire school a student sucking a Pop-Tart in a suggestive manner, and another flipping off the camera. Folks, if you're in front of a camera, always assume it is on. Reply 1. How do you suck off a Pop-Tart? Reply 2. Apparently, by biting it into the shape of a duck and then going to town on it. At least, that's what it seemed like from what we could see. I don't know. I'm not sure about the exact specifics of performing fellatio on pastries. Reply 3. In middle school, a girl got a black eye from being hit in the eye with a Pop-Tart. The best part is, her brother threw it. Story 7. Kid brought a gun to my high school and fired it off in a classroom during lunch. We had an open campus, and one of the teachers pulled the fire alarm thinking that would get the students out faster. Unfortunately, we were supposed to go out to the field if the alarm goes off. That's the meeting spot. Only problem was that it was right underneath the third floor classroom this kid was in. So we all get outside and teachers are running across the yard yelling at us to keep going to the hospital next door, which is super random. Freeway had to get shut down because it ran next to the classroom as well. The kid eventually let his 3 hostages go and fired at police in an attempt at police-assisted suicide. He got shot and ended up with brain damage, but actually lived. Reply: for everyone who wants to know the rest of the story, Sean Fitzpatrick was the shooter who, before the shooting, had developed paranoid schizophrenia and started hearing voices. Not wanting to tell his family in fear that they would think differently of him, he planned out this shooting and suicide. Left a note and some money in his room, I think. The events happened, he survived, and today he has a disfigured face and some brain damage, but he now works with law enforcement to educate them on how to handle mental health situations. Story 8. First day of freshman. After the roll call was called, one kid said his name was not called. What is your name? Hal Wirtz. For the next 4 years, someone would take a test for Hal, get photographed as Hal, join clubs as Hal. No one in the admin noticed it was someone different in each photo. The only time no one stood up for him was at graduation. Reply 1. Everyone should have stood up, LMAO. Reply 2. Same thing happened in Sydney, Australia back in the 70s. Some kids at a private school started a Brian Westlake themed version of the above story. It got picked up in other schools and eventually became so big, Brian became a graffiti topic. Brian Westlake was innocent. Brian Westlake for Prime Minister, etc. Still funny. Reply 3. We had a guy named at my school who went by his middle name instead of his first. The yearbook one year put him in twice, as his middle name once, as his first name. He had done school picture retakes, so they had 2 different photos of him too. The thing is, my school was small, like less than 150 students. I don't know how nobody noticed before the yearbook was published that he was not, in fact, his own identical twin. LOL. Story 9. I went to a boarding school several decades ago. My senior year, someone built an improvised explosive device out of 3 tanks of propane and hid it near the entrance of one of the dorms. This type of bomb is very dangerous, and apparently whoever built it knew what they were doing. To the school's credit, they did an excellent job dealing with this. They evacuated the kids from the dorm without telling them what had happened and kept people away without setting off panic. The local bomb squad was quietly called and the bomb was safely rendered harmless. After it was over, the head of the school told everyone what had happened. No one was hurt and the incident was quickly forgotten. Still, it's a crazy story. Reply. Man, mine is like the opposite. Pretty solid suburban high school that got bomb threats, like every day for a month plus. Pretty sure it was just bored teenagers looking to get out of class, but it actually just sucked. Teachers would watch us walk to the bathrooms and check the stalls afterwards, but the bomb threats just kept popping up. I remember a kid moved a mouse pad and underneath was some scrawled threat. School handled it horribly too. We all got sent to the gym a couple of times when it was raining. Having everyone in the concentrated area felt like a bad idea, but I wasn't about to tell my teacher that. Open communication wasn't really a thing. One kid got caught. Guess he was trying to impress his ex? Which, yeah, not sure how that works, but whatever. We all talked about how we'd broken some record for most bomb threats, which in hindsight, I don't think is a thing. Pretty sure the school finally just got the okay to consider it vandalism and not a credible threat, because otherwise, it didn't seem like the issue was going away. Not the most exciting story, but it's funny how little we had going on so that some a-holes just decided to make a thing that was just kind of a hassle. Story 10. Someone decided to smoke pot near some sort of vent and an entire wing of the school had to be shut down for it. Reply. Teacher. No marijuana unless you brought enough for the whole class. Student. Alright. Story 11. A few years after I graduated, a kid took another kid into the woods at lunchtime and strangled him to death with his belt before returning to class. The killer was tried as an adult and served 7 years. It has been reported that he was diagnosed with bipolar and other mental illness and was being raised in a neglectful home. I don't know what he is doing now. I don't know why he killed him, but heard rumors that it was over a $10 or similar loan. Story 12. A girl got pregnant and didn't tell anyone. Nobody noticed the whole time she was pregnant, and she finally gave birth in the school bathroom to a stillborn. She hid the body in her locker, and the body was found one day by the janitor who noticed a weird smell coming from the locker. The poor soul ended up in an institution. Her dad was actually a good friend of my dad, and I remember how devastated he was for years after. A tragic story. Reply. I know a girl who did something similar, except the baby survived, with some health problems. Not a single person knew she was pregnant. She was a bigger girl, and it was winter, so everyone was bundled up and carrying some extra weight. And if anything, she acted less pregnant, drinking and smoking more, which may have been a sign. She swore she was having a gallbladder attack, so her roommate took her to the ER. Nope, labor, full term. First, she named a recent partner, but that was biologically and mathematically impossible. We later pieced together that the pregnancy was a result of an assault, and she never told anyone. She just acting like never happened, and she couldn't be pregnant if she hadn't been raped, so she must not be pregnant. Baby was placed for adoption. She literally hasn't been the same since. ETA for those asking, baby got a good home, closed adoption. My friend just kind of went MIA from everyone, family included, for years. So I can't say for sure how she is now, but like I said, not the same. I think she just really wants to keep up the fiction that none of this ever happened. And I think she feels she can't do this if she is around people who know. Nothing happened to the guys you may have suspected. By the time she revealed the whole story, 9 whole months of gestation, plus labor, plus a few days of inaccurate stories had transpired. She'd hid and then lied about the pregnancy up until the moment the doctors in the ER were running tests for her gallbladder, which isn't normal behavior. She was an unreliable narrator, and he claimed it was consensual and they'd hung out since in a large group. So, obviously, she was just crazy. And objectively, she kind of was not in her right mind because of him, but she also wasn't super stable before that, hence the ability to be in complete denial. So it just wasn't a remotely strong case. Story 13. A guy got stabbed in the back. The attacker fled. He pulled the knife out of his back himself and then chased after his attacker like the freaking Hulk. Reply: ha, noob. Now I have a knife. This girl came to school embarrassingly drunk, staggering through the halls until a teacher tracked her down and carried her to the nurse's office. She was one of those conservative, quiet, mousy girls. That day she showed up, hair teased to the max, skimpy blouse, and the shortest skirt I've ever seen at the time. She was the topic of every conversation all day, and it was weeks before she resurfaced again, converting back to her quiet, mousy self. Story 15. At a party, someone, while very drunk, whipped out his duck and masturbated on someone else's car. It very quickly became the go-to retort whenever he tried giving someone else shit. You jizzed on a car. Reply: ha, this reminds me of someone who worked at a local fast food joint when I was younger. He got busted cranking one out in his car during his break and forever became known as Pac-Man. Story 16. Our biology teacher was everyone's favorite teacher. And so one year, everyone decided to prank him by leaving pennies everywhere he would go, and no one would acknowledge it to make him think he was crazy. It started out with people leaving pennies here or there in his classroom, but as time went on, it kept getting more and more extreme. Students started leaving cups of pennies on his desk, in his jackets. When he had speeches in the auditorium, people printed pictures of pennies and snuck them into the papers he was reading from. And finally, they print large pictures of pennies and snuck them into his classroom and put them on his walls. Reply 1. Oh no, free money. I hate this. Definitely don't keep doing it. That guy probably. Reply 2. I have no idea why, but I definitely thought this was going to end in him going crazy and killing himself. I much prefer your version. Reply 3. The best pranks are the ones that manage to drive someone batshit crazy without much risk of any actual harm. Reply 4. We switched 2 area rugs in an English teacher's classroom and replaced everything else perfectly. Same size, same pile, slightly different bland public school colors. He felt completely off his game for a week before he realized what happened. Reply 5. The best part was everyone acted like he was crazy and had no idea what he was talking about when he would find them. Reply 6. As a teacher, I would love and hate this at the same time. I recently had some 8th graders make me a hate book website that was actually really funny, not mean. Kids love teasing the teachers they trust. Story 17. Dude got caught bonking his twin sister. Reply 1. Like he for real got caught, or was this some rumor spread to ruin his reputation? Reply 2. There was a guy in my German class who I knew pretty okay when I was in high school. I went to a large school, so usually when something happened concerning a student, I had no idea who it was. But I had been in the band with this guy, went on field trips with him, rode in his truck with a few other people once, and even carried his books when he tore his ACL. We generally consider him a creep, especially since he always smelled like a barnyard. But I did hang around with him when I was new to the school, and nobody would have anything to do with me but the rejects. During my senior year, he was arrested for threatening to bomb or shoot up a school function, and it somehow came out after this that he had been raping his sister, a few years younger than us, and possibly even foreign exchange students whom his family hosted frequently. It was even rumored that his sister caught him having sex with a dude and he was punishing her to keep her quiet. Nobody knows for sure the whole story since we could only piece together what happened through hearsay, but we do know for certain that he's now serving a 70-year-plus prison sentence for various sexual crimes and terroristic threats. Reply 3. Casterly Rock High School. Story 18. Our ICT teacher unalived himself after his wife, who was a teaching assistant at our school, cheated on him. His son found him after he'd slit his wrist with a Stanley knife. He was a great teacher. The wife was not greeted well by the students and shortly resigned. Story 19. Freshman year, 2016 to 2017. A sophomore student incapacitated the boys' locker room after he was swinging on the pipes running overhead. One of the pipes broke under his weight, causing sewage to spill all over the room. Sophomore year 2017 to 2018, a couple of students were suspended after they had smeared their fecal matter all over the walls in the boys' restroom in the junior wing. This was in retaliation to the vice principal confiscating their Juul vape pens. Junior year 2018 to 2019, a senior from the special education wing was arrested and sentenced to 8 years in prison for 2 accounts of arson. The student had set fire to both the boys' and girl restrooms in the junior wing, causing $53,000 in damage. This is the same student that broke the overhead sewage pipe back in freshman year. Senior year 2019-2020, a senior student had witnessed the geometry teacher having sex with the geography teacher in the empty classroom between them. It has remained a secret amongst the students and the teachers, as both teachers were really cool and we did not want to see them lose their jobs. Reply: sounds like those teachers were boning up on topography. Story 20. It's a good story, but unfortunately never gained much popularity. My form tutor had a cane. It was really nice. Everyone liked him. One day he apparently tripped over that cane in the middle of a lesson. He wasn't very hurt, but the school still called his wife to inform her of what happened. It apparently went something like this: "Hello, Mrs. We just wanted to inform you that your husband has fallen over at work." "Oh gosh, is he okay?" "Yes, he's fine. He just tripped over his cane. He doesn't have a cane." So yeah, my form tutor had a cane and was faking his disability. After this came out, some students claimed to have seen him actually running in the local park on Saturdays, and many people had noticed that sometimes he wouldn't actually put his cane on the ground. He would just move it back and forth, but never actually made contact with the ground. Reply 1. Was this to park in the disabled spaces or something? Did he assume his boss would go easier on him if he were disabled? I'm sorry, I really don't understand why someone would do that. Reply 2. I don't know why. Me and my sister assumed it was for some sort of tax purpose or benefits, but I don't know how he would get away with that without his wife knowing. Possibly for extra pay. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll ever find the exact answer myself. Story 21. I grew up in rural Oklahoma in the 80s. 2 of my teachers married, barely, former students. The biggest event I can remember in my day was that one of the 8th graders, I was a senior when this happened, it was a K through 12 school, started dating a guy who graduated 5 years before I did. So she was 14 and he was 21, 22. This was extremely common, and the town was so poor that it was encouraged because he was seen as a contributing breadwinner, and all these girls were just going to become wives or mothers when they graduate anyway. 90% did. She took him home and he met her 28-year-old mother, and he dropped the middle schooler like a hot brick. I was privy to all of this because 1, it was a very small town, and 2, my parents owned the local grocery store and everyone told their business there. So fast forward to the Halloween dance, the community was welcome, so there are adults there as well as high school kids. This was a dumb idea for obvious drug and alcohol reasons. Boyfriend shows up at the dance with 8th grader. I am DJing, my mixtape was a thing of beauty. White Snake into Skinner into George Strait. Magic. Mama comes into the gym and grabs 8th grader by the hair, and they roll around on the dance floor, gouging and dropping G's and screaming their love for Richie. You get your goddamn hands off my man, and you don't even know how to suck a pecker yet, type smack talk. Principal and coach drag them outside, and half the crowd stays to dance to my Elton John Denver mix, and the other half stands in the gym parking lot watching 2 attractive blondes fight over a man with a concave chest, pube mustache, and a part-time job sweeping and emptying trash at his uncle's laundromat. Story 22. The lad who was considered the cock of the school, the toughest guy and the most popular for non-English, got caught molesting his own siblings. Story 23. My daughter's guidance counselor was arrested for selling drugs. She was a horrible GC. I was considering changing to the other GC, then I didn't have to. She told any student not going into STEM that they would never get a job. I get being realistic with kids, but she was militant and overly aggressive about it, and my daughter got a job right out of college in her field. Story 24. A football player's heart stopped on the field, but his life was saved because an AED was readily available, leading to a change in the law requiring them to be present at every game. Story 25. There was an illegal arms dealer in my school who was selling knives and tasers to kids. Reply 1. How did it get found out? Reply 2. I have no idea. Probably just some kid told administration. Story 26. A kid came out to a few friends, and as the old saying goes, those friends told a few of their friends, who told a few of their friends, and so on. Within 2 weeks, there was a petition to have him removed from the school, and the other 3 high schools in town had petitions passed around to prevent him from transferring. Instead of doing something about it, most teachers and administrators signed the petition as well and looked away when he was being harassed. He had to walk around with a friend group everywhere so he wasn't jumped and couldn't even use the toilet. He had to go down the street to the gas station instead. He even almost failed gym because he couldn't be in the locker room with the other boys without a beating. He ended up dropping out midway through his senior year and leaving town. Edit. I should add, the local paper got wind of it and tried to do a story on discrimination and gay rights, but that only escalated the situation, which was the eventual cause of him leaving town. Story 27. Mormon jock white kids grabbed a Mexican girl's ass. At that time, there was a gang called WPB Wetback Power, which was a rather large gang consisted of Mexican Americans or immigrant kids. What started as a huge brawl turned into a campus riot, and students were throwing soda cans at teachers and destroying everything they could. Riot Squad was called, and the whole block had to be closed off, shut down. Story 28. Phys ed teacher, male, late 20s, was discovered to have a relationship with a senior, 18 female, who also happened to be the daughter of the high school principal. Phys ed teacher's wife also worked at the school, and when it came out, she threw him out. He still needed his job, so he moves into a camper, which was parked at the school, and stays there the remaining 6 months or so. He then follows her to college and gets a job in that town. I haven't heard anything in the last couple years, but they were together last I heard. Reply 1. Why or how wasn't he fired? WTF? Reply 2. I'm not totally sure. She was of age, but my assumption was that there was, finish this year and we won't renew your contract, but I can't be sure. Story 29. My old wrestling coach had a sexual relationship with my, at the time, 15-year-old classmate. They were found out when her mother found love letters from him to her. To think I used to wrestle him during practice when he was touching girls in the grade above me makes me sick. Story 30. When I was a freshman in high school, I was on the JV football team and we had a physical trainer who everyone hated. Our football team won our last game of the season and it was only our second win of the year. Naturally, we were celebrating pretty loudly in the locker room that night. Out of nowhere, the athletic trainer burst into the locker room and cussed us out, seemingly just for being joyous about the win. The next morning, I'm walking around the hallways of the school and I notice a bunch of people with printed pictures of his face taped to their shirts. Turns out, right about the time he came in the locker room to yell at us, he found out that he'd been caught for soliciting sex from a minor over the internet. Everyone hated this man to the extent that the next day they printed off his mugshot and walked around the school with it taped to their t-shirt. Story 31. The band teacher's son, who was in my sophomore class, was murdered by a hunting rifle in a field while walking home from school. The murder went unsolved for 20 years. They think it was 2 older boys, but they both unalived themselves in the 1990s. Really sad, especially because the murderer's younger brother was a good friend of the murdered kid. The younger brother was part of a group of friends that visited with the murdered boy's parents every Friday afternoon after he was killed. They did this for years, until they went away to college, etc. Story 32. Oh, I have lots. The most memorable one was the student who set off a ton of cherry bombs in the bottom floor toilet to get the staff to come running to the scene, then setting off tear gas once they got there. No one knew why he did it. Story 33. We were put on lockdown for 2-ish hours and the teachers were just advised to keep teaching. Everyone was confused. Come to find out, some girl met this guy on the internet and he flew from Vegas to try and kidnap her. He found her in the parking lot. She came in for half days because she had college classes in the morning, and he chased her in the building until another student stopped him from actually entering the building. He's still in prison for attempted kidnapping. Story 34. During recess in elementary school, there was a kid that climbed up to the top of a snowbank that other kids were playing on, dropped his pants, and started peeing all over the other kids climbing the snowbank. It was pure chaos. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, then make sure to like and subscribe. Also, feel free to comment any video idea you would like us to cover next.